Hello and welcome. This is the For the Fans podcast. My name is Justin Melillo. I've got Kevin McAdams alongside me. Kevin, it's kind of late on a Monday night.
Yep.
You just we weren't sure if we were gonna get this going tonight or not, but I'm glad to be here. How you doing tonight?
Yeah, around 7:30, 8 o'clock, I felt pretty tired, but I caught a second wind about an hour ago, so decided to get the ball rolling. Funny that we're just kind of screwing around here. I'm literally watching a 17 by 17 Rubik's Cube video of the most obscure thing, so I'm well prepared for tonight's show. But I really I didn't see one of the three races we're going to talk about, but I really enjoyed the two that I saw. I think it's going to be a good show.
Yeah, I look forward to it as well. I think this is going to end up being our shortest show of the time that we've been doing this, episode number 7. Just because as it currently stands, it's 11:35 at night. I've got work in 4 hours. I'm sure you've got some things that you got to be doing tomorrow as well. So let's get right into it here. We're gonna be going over the weekend that was. We had the Truck Series, the Gander Outdoor Truck Series at Gateway. We had the K&N Pro Series, which isn't a national touring series. It's either East or West, and we had the West guys out in Sonoma with the Cup Series. Xfinity was off. Also, in other realms of racing, there was Formula One and IndyCar that also went on. We're not going to talk about those tonight, but they did happen over the weekend. We're going to talk about the way that the stages kind of played into how the race wound up on Sunday in the Cup Series. But first and foremost, the first race of the weekend, they were at Gateway. Truck Series Night in America. Gateway, it's now WorldWide Technology Raceway at Gateway or something.
Yeah.
And it's such a compelling story, but the legend of Ross Chastain continues. The man, he can be kicked down so many times, and yet he still manages to pick himself back up. It's incredible to see. Ross Chastain, winner at Gateway.
Yeah, that race just altogether was really good. I don't know how much you caught of it. I had to watch it on Sunday before the Cup race just because I was in the middle of building a bunch of stuff here in the house, still getting the house settled. I really enjoyed the race just because you had early passing early. You had Stuart Friesen leading the first 20 or so laps, and then here comes Grant Enfinger. But obviously Ross is the class of the show just because he won. But I kind of want to start about just the way the race started early. I was really impressed with not only how good every truck was, because it seemed like if you were in the top 5, you had a shot at being up front, and it was really interesting to see just how like even and equally matched everyone was. But I mean, the whatever Gateway did with the traction compound, they did it last year too, I believe. The racing was really good, and it kind of shows and supports why I think they should come here in more than the truck series, because man, that was a really good race. That was a really good race. And it was awesome to see Ross win the ultimate, like, oh, we're just going to completely kick you down while you're at your highest of the year. And he comes back in the 45 this time. He's not in the 38 or the 44. He's back in the 45, and he claims victory again. And this time, it's legal.
Yes, that is the important part, is that this win will stick. His first win of the season, they didn't count it because he wasn't going for points at the time. His second win of the season, and yes, it was a win, even though it was disqualified. I'm going to still count it as a win just because of the technicalities and all the crap that went into that. His second win didn't count because they disqualified him. They gave that victory over to Brett Moffitt last week at Iowa. This week, he called the shot. He said, well, we're just going to have to go win at Gateway. And sure enough, he went out there. He made a really ballsy choice at the end of the race. It he was in second coming down to it, and the 51 truck, which this week was being driven by Christian Eckes,
Yep.
he was leading. He was pretty much, it looked like he was going to be cruising on to a victory. Eckes goes into the pits. He takes 2 tires. Ross goes into the pits. No tires, just fuel. And the way that they come out of the pits, still under green flag conditions, Ross has about maybe a second, maybe 2 second lead over the 51 truck and the rest of the field. The caution comes out. This is with like, it's got to be with like 10 laps to go. And the 18 and the 2 get together. That bunches up the field, and now you're like, oh, wow. Ross is going to have to hold these guys off now. He doesn't have that gap anymore. He's got old tires. Is he going to be able to do it? And he does. He pulls himself into the victory lane. Very impressive win. Very definitely a defining win for Ross Chastain, because now all he's got to do is he's got to make up 30 some odd points just to make the top 20 in the next 4 races, which is very, very doable. The race itself, I didn't get to watch much of it just because I was trying to do a bunch of stuff on PlayStation, trying to get some updates done for our GTA night that I was sad that you weren't there for.
Very sad.
Very, very sad. But, I mean, RNC wasn't there either, so it was what it was. But I was, like, flipping back and forth in between, and I ended up turning on the race fully because we were waiting on people. I turned it on fully with about 50 laps to go, and I was able to watch to the end. So I didn't really catch much of the beginning part of it, but I know that Friesen was fast, and I thought he had a chance at winning. I knew that the 18 was pretty fast, and up until his incident with the 2 truck, he had a pretty good shot at winning. Of course, the 51 truck, he started on the pole because of the rain out, and he was leading coming down to it just before the final pit stops. I thought he had a really good shot at winning. But at the end of the day, it was Ross Chastain making a statement, winning at Gateway.
Yeah, you're pretty much on point as far as who was competitive. It was crazy. So Enfinger won stage 1, and then you had stage 2. Stage 2 was pretty much all Thor Sport. It was really crazy. You had Rhodes, Crafton, Snyder, and Enfinger all in the top 4, all like back to back to back. And there was a point where Myatt Snyder actually is the one who is subbing for Johnny Sauter during his suspension, and he finished 6th earlier this year at Martinsville, basically in the fifth truck for that team, and he was incredibly impressive. He was really good. He soldiered through the field, had a call on strategy. I think took 2 tires during the stage 1 break, put himself like 4th or 5th, and he was right in the thick of it for pretty much the whole entire first half of the race. Grant won both stages, but Enfinger and Snyder were having a really good battle at the end. It was really impressive to see not only Thor Sport just going 1, 2, 3 in the stage, but seeing Myatt Snyder up there was awesome. And then looking at the finish, obviously there was some shenanigans at the end, but Chandler Smith having another strong showing in the 46 in the iBuyPower Kyle Busch Toyota. I mean, he's showing why he was in that truck at Iowa. He had another strong running. So I mean, it was I like I said, I really enjoyed this race. I really like this track, especially with the compound, giving it a second and maybe even a third groove. It's basically, if you're not really too familiar with Gateway, it's basically like the baby of New Hampshire and kind of Darlington. They have really long straightaways. They're going about 165 even in the trucks going into turn 1, but they're going down to about 100 miles an hour. It's a really interesting track, and it's really fun to watch. And if you've never seen a race there, as far as like even in person or on TV, it's always a fun race to watch just because it's such an interesting track, and it's different, and it's honestly what NASCAR should be looking at for the future as far as a possible date. Because like I mentioned in my schedule talks last week, WorldWide Technology is involved. You got this truck race was great. IndyCar goes there. Maybe in the future. Cup can go there as well. Hi, Jarvis.
Hi, Jarvis.
But yeah, I enjoyed the race. Of course, Ross winning is awesome. So I'm very happy for him.
I just noticed I didn't catch it before. The 40 you said before, the 46 had sponsorship from iBuyPower.
Yeah,
Um, that's really funny because
it's ironic because we were just talking about it.
we were just talking about them over the weekend. So really cool to see new sponsors like that getting involved in the sport. Ross had a new sponsor on his truck, I believe, with CarShield.com.
Mm-hmm.
So just really cool to see that going on. It was a fun evening for sure, and I wish I could have watched more of the event, but you know I had other things to do. Myatt Snyder, coming in to sub for the 13 truck, he was definitely I don't think he got the finish that he deserved out there. Chandler Smith, 4th place, definitely a good call out. Todd Gilliland, we talk about him pretty much every week. It's good to see him finishing up there in 2nd, and I don't want to like rain on Ross's parade, but if he would have gotten disqualified again, that would have been possibly Todd Gilliland's first career victory in that fashion. So, like you were saying before, there was definitely a point where it seemed a lot of trucks were very equal, and anybody could have came out on top on Saturday night, but at the end of the day, it was Ross Chastain. Very cool to see how that's happening. As long as he makes up, I think it's 38 points on 20th place, which is Josh Rayum actually is in 20th place. I'm looking at the standings right now. There are, let's see, 12, 13, 14 drivers in the top 20 who have run every race. Ross would be the 15th guy who's run every race, even though he didn't get credit for the first 8 of them. You've got guys that are in the top 20 that are not full-time. Josh Rayum, Corey Roper, Anthony Alfredo, Austin Wayne Self. Those are all drivers that are, any single one of them or a couple of them. Ross is sitting like 26 right now. He's gonna get in the top 20. It's not even a question, unless he like blows up the next 4 weeks, which would be just an incredible amount of bad luck. Which I don't know how much more bad luck this guy can take, but as long as like hell doesn't freeze over for Ross Chastain, he'll be making the 2019 playoffs in the Truck Series.
Oh yeah, no, I think he's a shoe in. I mean, he gained 31 points on Rayom just this week alone, and I mean, barring the Iowa race, he'd already be in there. I think he'll be solidly in the top 15 by the time the regular season's over. The one thing that's kind of crazy was with Sauter being out, we have a really solid battle for that final 8th place spot between Creed, Gilliland, and Sauter. So that's going to be that's going to be probably the focus from here until the end, because I think it's a shoe in for sure that Chastain's going to get in. I mean, like you said, barring some kind of freak incident 4 weeks in a row, he's in. It's going to be that's going to be who's going to get the last spot, and I think if it's weird because Creed's been consistent this year. He hasn't really shown anything like fantastic. He hasn't been like, oh man, he's going to win this week, or he's been like a top 8, top 10 guy all year. It's kind of bizarre because we've kind of been all over Gilliland as far as like, oh, he hasn't really been producing. But if that team can get some consistency, and if Sauter can get the consistency and the results he's had in the past, whoever is in 8th, if it's either of those two guys, they could have a legitimate shot at the championship towards the end. Because I mean, they're both solid drivers, regardless of how we've been criticizing Todd. I mean, he's in a KBM truck. If they can figure it out, it's KBM. They'll if he gets in, they'll be able to do something about it.
Just a little clarification on the way that the points shake out. Right now, Brett Moffitt would be the number 1 seed based on his point position. He's the highest currently in the standings with a victory. then it would be Austin Hill, then it would be
Mhm.
Johnny Sauter. If Ross gets in, Ross would be number 4. Actually, if Ross gets in, he'll be number 1 because he has no. He would be number 4. I'm
Yeah, he has
sorry.
one win.
He
So
yeah
Sutter does have a win. I forgot about that.
right. So those 4 would be the winners that would get in, and then it would go to 4 more on points. That would be currently the top 4 in the standings: Grant Enfinger, Stuart Friesen, Matt Crafton, and Ben Rhodes.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So both Burton and Gilliland would be on the outside looking in if Chastain is able to get up there into the top 20, which he's probably going to be able to do that. Burton is going to be, let's see, he's almost 60 points out of the final position, which is Ben Rhodes. Ben Rhodes has 417 points, and Burton has 364. So that's that's about 53 points difference, which is pretty much a full race. So I mean, if they win, then it's going to be a hell of a battle between Friesen, uh, Crafton, and Rhodes for that final spot, because I think Enfinger's going to have enough points at this point. He's pretty much got a full race on everybody else.
Yeah, I think he's the regular. I think he's going to be the regular season champion. But I mean, that's going to give him a lot of points. I think they do the same thing
Mm-hmm.
for the trucks as they do for Cup, giving him that
Yes.
bonus. That's going to be really good for him.
Yeah, they give the regular season champion 15 playoff points going into the entire playoffs. So, and he's got a 54-point advantage over Friesen right now. So in 4 races, I don't think that's going to be surmountable by Friesen or anybody else in that general area, which is Friesen, Crafton, Rhodes, and Moffitt. So it's going to be interesting. It's pretty much win or go home for everybody that's not currently in that position. Burton, Gilliland, Creed. Those are the big ones. So
That's just wild. And I apologize for being so misinformed about these points. They always change it every year, and I
mm-hmm.
should know better. But man, that's crazy to think about because I just the idea that both KBM trucks could miss it, like both of the full time KBM trucks missing it, is just like mind blowing. You have Kyle Busch and then Greg Biffle winning six races in that 51 truck combined, and then you have the 18 and the 4 not winning any races at all. I mean, that's just that's an incredible stat if that's how it pans out come the end of the regular season. And if you're right about like basically pulling the winning you're in, that's gonna be pretty insane for the points. Especially, I can't imagine Kyle's disappointment that he's gonna have if both of his trucks fully sponsored, fully funded, not getting in. That's just an incredible possibility.
Well, they'll have 5 more chances. I think I've been saying 4. They'll have 5 more chances to get it done. Chicagoland this weekend. Then they'll have Kentucky in a couple weeks. Then they'll be back at Pocono. Then they'll have Eldora just a few days later. And then finally, rounding out the regular season, will be Michigan. 5 more chances to win. We could end up, and this is very highly unlikely, but we could end up with 9 winners, which means a winner might not get in, which has never happened before in this type of format. But
That wouldn't pan out well for Ross because he's so far back.
yeah, that would be that would be the ultimate bad luck for Ross, getting the win and not being able to use it because he's so far back in the point standings. But I highly doubt that's going to happen, just because the guys that are who have won, Brett Moffitt, Ross Chastain, I think that they can win again. Johnny Sauter definitely could win again.
It's possible though. That's crazy.
It is possible, but I think it's pretty highly unlikely. But we'll see what happens. I'm sure we'll have some Cup guys in there too, to spoil some of the fun, because they're allowed to race in these 5 races as well. So we'll see how it all pans out. But let's move over to the West Coast and talk about some fun in the sun on the weekend that was in Sonoma Raceway. I just wanted to go over quickly the K&N race. Now, you were telling me beforehand that you didn't get to see much of it. You did see the restart at the end, the controversy. I was thoroughly enjoyed. I got to sit down and watch that on Race Fans or whatever it was.
Fans' choice.
Fans Choice, yeah. They streamed the whole thing. All you had to do was sign up with your email address. So I just put in some random bogus email address that I got, and I got to watch the whole race, which was really cool. It was, I would say, the race of the weekend, just because of the complete chaos and controversy, and like, it had everything. It had some good racing. It had people side by side throughout the corners going as hard as they can. There were definitely some wrecks. There were definitely some tempers. the final caution, they took the caution and the checker at the same time. They ran the last lap under caution or whatever. And I just remember that one of the drivers was laying into another driver that had spun him out. Uh, it was really insane to watch, because like, he laid on him pretty much the entire course. Just they were hitting each other, banging into each other. But the big story of the K&N race was the final restart. And you had a bunch of Cup guys in that race because they wanted to get some practice for the next day. You had Ryan Preece, Daniel Hemrick, Austin Dillon. Then you had Noah Gragson, who's not a Cup guy.
Custer was there too.
Yeah, and Cole Custer, he's also not a Cup guy. But these guys are trying to get as much practice as they can when they need to race this track at the highest level. So you had five of those drivers in the field, and they were pretty much the guys that were running up in the top five for most of the event. Sans Will Rogers, he was like the only guy that was up there that was even contending, that was a regular in that series.
He's a really good driver.
Very good, yes.
Harvick has touted him as being one of the best young talents. I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Right. So, coming down to the end of the race, earlier, actually, Noah Gragson had been dominating and leading pretty much the entire race, and just before their halfway break, they have halftime in K&N. So just before their halftime break, Noah got dinged with a restart violation where he jumped the start, and they brought him down pit road, and he had to start at the back of the field. He worked his way back up, and it was very impressive to watch through the K&N rules and the way that the restarts work and whatnot. Very impressive to watch Noah even get a shot at possibly getting the win. But on the final restart, it was Ryan Preece who had taken over the control of the race in the second half. And they dinged Preece for a restart violation on the very last restart. They ended up black flagging him, putting him at the end of the line, and Gragson had worked his way up into second place. So essentially it handed Noah Gragson an easy victory there. I don't know. I don't think it was a jump more than it was Daniel Hemrick spinning his tires or not getting as good of a start. And I think Hemrick even said that on Twitter tonight. Let me see. He's Daniel Hemrick, and I quote, "Okay, let's clear the air here. Ryan Preece by no means jumped the start. I said that in the media center after the race. I couldn't get my car to accelerate like he could. He was penalized for himself and his team being on their game, disappointing call, and a checker flag taken from them." That's crazy.
It seems like it's universal. It's just bizarre because we just had an incident over at Michigan with Joey Logano, and they did the complete opposite. We didn't. I don't know how much we talked about it. Just trying to recap, but it was a pretty evident jump back then. At Michigan, he clearly jumped it, and in this case, I don't know if there's a different angle that race control could see. Maybe they actually called it from the tower, but it looks pretty clean from what angles I've seen, and even You got drivers actually defending Priest's restart. I mean, it's just crazy that that race control got it this wrong. But it seemed like from what I heard, the race was just all over the place. I mean, you'll get that with these local races, but I mean, I'm sure they had some additional help from the big guys with Cup being in town. It's just maybe they just overstepped and just did a little too much. Um, at the end of the day, it's for most of these guys, it's an exhibition race. But I mean, of course, to any driver, any race is important. You want to win, so you hate not to quote what we always say, you hate to see it, but you hate to see Priest basically run away with it and run a clean race at the end. And because of a formality with getting a bad penalty, he loses it. And Gregson wins and does his whole celebratory vomiting, which is pretty disgusting, but for some reason it's a ritual of his. So he does that and takes away the win, which is cool to see. I've been one of the biggest critics of Gregson and seen him win and do a really good job based on what I've heard, not only from you but from other people. Him coming through the field showcases his talent, and that's something that I always want to see from these guys. So good win for him.
Ryan Preece, I mean, clearly he was there to gain experience, to get some type of track time, but he said in a post-race interview with Claire B. Lang that he was out there to win, and it's he wasn't really taking anything from that event because the cars are so different. He got familiar with the track, sure, but at the end of the day, he was just another racer looking for a win, like he does when he goes out and drives his modifieds out in the Northeast. Ryan Preece wants to win and has the talent to win, and he got robbed. He did. I just like Sebastian Vettel in Canada a couple weeks ago. The officials come in, they make a call, and the clear winner of the race gets absolutely screwed. And I'm getting to the point where it's like it's sickening because we're not talking about the racing. We're not talking about the incredible, you know, him versus Hemrick versus Gregson. We're not talking about any of that. We're talking about how the officials deemed that one restart, which was probably his cleanest restart in the entire day. They
Right.
deemed that one to be the one where he gets penalized for it and completely changes the outcome of the race. I'm getting tired of it. I'm getting tired of talking about penalties, and I'm getting tired of talking about officials making calls and changing the outcome. Granted that, yeah, if Ross's truck last week was illegal or was out of tolerance, then they have to do that. And if Priest would have actually jumped that, then they would have had to do it. But I mean, from both of those instances, it was from what I understand a part failure on Ross's part, where it didn't affect the truck and didn't make him faster by any means. And this week it wasn't Priest, it was Hemrick spinning his tires, which made him look like he got a better start. And it's just, I'm getting tired of it. I really am. I just want to talk about racing, and we're talking about is controversy from the officials making their calls.
Yeah, and it happens across the board, and not only motorsports, but I mean all sports. It's just so weird in this day and age. I mean, NASCAR has implemented the whole pit road technology, the whole like, oh, if you cross a certain number of stalls, you get a penalty, or if you lose a tire and it's without no longer within hands reach, it's a penalty. And they're so precise on some of these things, but then it's an ultimate judgment call on, and we know this just because we run. I mean, it's sim racing, but a restart is really important. Like it's for most series. Like if you're the leader and you can get out to a 2 car length lead, because you jump the restart and you get, if say like you get the call and they just let you go on, that's a huge advantage. And in this case, he didn't even do anything wrong. Hemrick is the one that actually spins his tires. Like I said, I didn't really see much of like I didn't see all, like I saw it, but I didn't like go in and out, analyze it. But I'll take his word for it that he spun out, or that he spun his tires. But the fact that they got it wrong because of someone else's mistake is pretty egregious. It's just like the whole thing that they, with F1, they've been like penalizing guys. I saw that they penalized someone yesterday 10 seconds. I forget what, I think it was Ricardo. Um, it's just like, what's going on where across the board we need to start using technology that we have uh, right in the palm of our hands. And it's like, let's use it and be precise about this stuff. Like, let's get it right. Like, let's have a digital line, and we have all this data that they can see when the cars accelerate, all that. They can see all of that. They can easily pinpoint, all right, he did it 50 feet before the line. Let's black flag him. Or he did it 10 feet before the line. That's okay. Like, that's perfectly fine. Like, whatever they want to do, they want to have a gray area built into their system. At least tell us about it. But, like, it's just ridiculous that NASCAR, just in particular, is so consistently inconsistent. And it's getting, like you said, it's aggravating. It's ridiculous. It's like, I can't wait until Daytona, because we're gonna have probably another controversy there, because either they'll throw a yellow flag too late, or they won't throw it early enough, or they'll have something go on with the yellow line. It's just like it's sad that like that's an aspect of our discussion at this point, because it should be, like you said, all about the racing, and we shouldn't. That should be completely an oversight. Like, just, oh, it's just oh, they're going to officiate the race, and that's going to be the end of it. I just don't remember it being like this when I was younger, just because I felt like things were a lot more open.
I was thinking about making a tweet, and I ended up not doing it just because I was driving to work and I wanted to be safe and not text and drive. But they were talking about it on the radio, that Nice Motorsports still considers that their victory, quote unquote victory at Iowa, was their second one of the season, which of course the record books will never show that because he was disqualified. But like I was thinking of like, what other races in my lifetime they have they done that where the guy who should have won didn't win? And I was thinking like, well, Reagan Smith at Talladega that one year with Tony Stewart, where they, penalized him for passing below the line, and then another below the line with Justin Haley, in the Xfinity Series, and Kyle Larson ended up winning
At that race, and I legit threw my hat. I was not a fan of Justin Haley until about 50 feet before the line for that race, and I was so pissed off. But
Yeah,
go on.
yeah. Other ones that I can think of, and not really a penalty in this case, but just more of a judgment call where, NASCAR had to pick one of possibly three people. The Talladega race in the Xfinity Series, where there was a wreck coming to the line and they ended up throwing the caution, and Elliott Sadler's like kind of going through the grass a little bit, and Brennan Poole's passing him, and then Justin Allgaier's there, and it's like, who's got it? Is it because at one point Allgaier's in front, and then at another point Sadler's in front, but it's really Poole who gets to the line first, and they ended up giving it to Sadler because at the time of the caution, Sadler was in front, even though he's like going through the grass. And
That happened. That happened when we went there in the spring of 2013. Do you remember that, when they had that big wreck in the middle of the trioval? And I think it was Casey Kane and Joey Logano. I think it was. Like, Kane made it to the line first, but they gave it to Logano because he was ahead at the time of the caution. I'm just trying to refresh myself, but it was something along those lines. Like, this happens a lot where NASCAR gets involved, and where it should just be just an organic race to the line. And I think they've kind of learned their lesson with all these mistakes.
no,
With
I remember that race very vividly. They were like three wide coming to the line, and they ended up throwing the caution like in the trioval, because of the wreck. And they raced back to the line. It was Casey Kane who won that race, but they ended up giving it to Reagan Smith. He was in front at the time. So, yeah, it like, yes, we have to have officials, and yes, we have to have some judgment calls at times, but I mean, there are just some common sense things that need to happen. It's annoying, and I'll just leave it at that because it's 12:10 in the morning and we've got to move on.
Yeah.
So Anyway, we'll go to the less of the implicative races of the weekend. That was Sonoma in the Cup Series, the Toyota Save Mart 350. It was I don't want to call it an uneventful race because it definitely had
I
some.
enjoyed it.
Uh, yeah, it was a good race in the sense that it was like a standard, um, road course race. They were, they were going at it, and there were no cautions besides the two stage breaks. So immediately people would point at that and be like, oh, well, they weren't really going that hard then because nobody wrecked. But I mean, there were some instances where Eric Almirola and Paul Menard had gotten spun around, but they were going at it, and they had the strategy with the stages and everything to decide who was going for the win and who was going for stage points, and you had to kind of keep track at home. Like, okay, William Byron went out and he dominated stage one, but if he would have pitted, would he have been a factor for the win if he would have gave up that stage?
Right.
Like, but Truex, Cole Perrin, they played the strategy right. They won 2 years in a row now. Third win of Truex's career at Sonoma. Um, he was able to hold off Kyle Busch, who we all know Kyle Busch doesn't like to lose. Kyle Busch doesn't like to lose so much that he punted Ryan Blaney at one point and completely messed up his nose, and it was very, very funny to see him racing around with such a crunched in nose for the rest of the race. But he was trying to track down Truex and just didn't have it. But I didn't not enjoy the race. I didn't think it was a bad race by any means. It wasn't the greatest race. It definitely wasn't like the K&N race from the day before. It was a race. It was a road course race at Sonoma, and I think it got the job accomplished.
Yeah, I think people are like, it's kind of like how some of us were spoiled with how like super speedway racing was with the COT, like 80 lead changes, they're tandem in, they're all back and forth, and it's just ridiculous. Like the standard is so high for that era of super speedway racing. I think it's the same way with road course racing. We expect chaos, and when we don't get chaos, it's like, wow, that race was really boring. That race was really bad. Um, that's pretty much how road course racing was with NASCAR. What we saw, minus the stage racing, and we'll get to that in a second. I mean, minus the whole like if you didn't pit for the stage, you basically screwed yourself out of a win. I didn't like that at all, and I think that, well, like I said, we'll get to it. I didn't like it at all, but the strategy of Bush pitting 3 laps later almost did pay off for him. He overcame about a 7.5 second gap and got it down to about a second. And I think Truex was obviously saving his stuff as much as he could during that period. And he solidly great strategy. He's been fast here. He's got 3 wins here. I mean he's starting to become one of those guys where he's going to start knocking on Jeff Gordon's record here. He's got 3. Gordon has 5. I mean, I don't see Truex retiring in the next 5 years. Him and Kyle Busch seem to be the two, especially here, that they're the class of the field. It's just I think we're gonna be like that as long as they're both with Gibbs. They're gonna be like that for the next 5 to 10 years, however long Truex runs. But good good win. I mean, he deserved it. Hey, for some reason, Cole Perrin, man, he can make a car go fast, left or right. He's done really well for himself. If he didn't get wrecked at the Roval, he'd have 4 straight wins at road courses because he won at if I remember correctly, he won at Watkins Glen
No,
last year too.
Elliott won at Watkins Glen.
Oh, he won in 2017. That's right.
Right.
But still, he would have had 3 wins in the last 4 road course races. So I mean, they've obviously got something figured out there. But going back to like the quality of the racing, I enjoyed the hell out of it. I mean, look at Matt DiBenedetto, finished 4th. Like what? Or no, yeah, he did finish 4th because he was behind Blaney. So I mean, there's some stories in this race that were definitely interesting and something to look at. So I mean, I know people didn't like it because we didn't have a demolition derby at the end or guys getting spun out for the lead, but this is what road course racing is in Cup in NASCAR, but people have been spoiled the last few years.
Yeah, Truex has definitely proven that he's one of the best road course racers that's out there, along with Kyle Busch, and I'd even throw Ryan Blaney into that hat a little bit, considering that he won at the Roval last year. No, Blaney didn't dominate the Roval, but he was in the position to win it after Johnson and Truex had gotten together in the final corner. Sure enough, Blaney with a third place finish here at Sonoma, and it was pretty, considering Truex and Busch just had their strategy right on, and they were just gunning through the field as good as they were. Blaney was the best of the rest, coming in third that day. DiBenedetto, he credits his fourth place finish to his friend AJ Allmendinger, who we all know Allmendinger is the road ringer of NASCAR. AJ didn't race today or yesterday because Priest is in his car now. But Matt said that he had some conversations with AJ trying to figure out how the car should feel and whatnot, and he credits a lot of that to Allmendinger. So really good to see DiBenedetto having some success in that number 95. Denny Hamlin, he was the winner of stage 2. He had a pretty fast car. He ended up coming in 5th. And the other stage winner, like I had mentioned before, was William Byron. Byron didn't have as good of a finish to the race as he probably would have hoped. Thankfully, he had gotten all the stage points that he did. I think he ended up with like 18 stage points at the end of the day. He ended up coming home in 19th place. But just to, go with the talk about the stages, that I said it on Twitter. There was another reporter who had mentioned that road courses would have a lot of would do a lot better if they just race through the end of the stage. Like, keep the stages, keep the points that you get through the stage, and just race through the end of the lap and continue going on green as if nothing happened. And that's something that you and I have been doing for years,
Right.
over at FTF, the racing side of it, the NR 2003 side of FTF. We've been doing that for years, although we didn't do it last night because of... Ironically, we didn't do that last night.
We shouldn't have done it, but go on.
Right. But everywhere else that we go, we just race through the end of the stage, and that opens up so many more different strategies. Yeah, you could split up the race, and you could still do the same strategies like they were doing, where they're pitting coming to 3 to go in the stage or 2 to go in the stage, and you end up, because of the way that the breaks happen, that's the only way you're going to be in contention to win these races. If you go out and you try and win the stage, you're just setting yourself up to be in the middle of the pack, and it's so hard to pass with these cars as it is. I'm very surprised Denny Hamlin was able to get back up to 5th place. That's just how good of a car that he had, and just it's a testament to how good all the Gibbs cars were on Sunday afternoon, because he was able to get back up to 5th place even after staying out and winning stage number 2. That's just how it was on Sunday. I really... It's definitely its strategy, and it brings a different element into the way that these races are, but I don't like that they have to give it up. You have to choose. Do you take some points, or do you take the possibility of winning? There's only going to be one winner, so I mean, if you're in Chad Knass's shoes with William Byron, who doesn't even have top 5 yet to his name. Not saying that he couldn't have gone out there and dominated and led every single lap and won that race, but that was the call that they made. They made the call to go out there and gain as many points as they could. I guess they didn't think that they could go out and win that race, and that's the choice that these teams have to make with these stages. And I'm honestly not a fan of it.
No, I agree. As far as like the points go, I mean, if Denny Hamlin was, if we were doing this by points, he had the highest points by 7 over the race winner of Truex, and Truex went the route of pitting early, and it paid off. So I mean, I agree with you 100%. When you have these road course races, I think the issue, especially this year, the fuel window was so close to the end of the stage. So it's not like they could have just run through the stage, pit with 5 or 6 laps to go on the next stage. I think it's just the way they panned out. They were too close together to the actual pit window. Uh, it's I don't personally. I think the point of the stages is to highlight who's running up front early on in the race. I think that was the whole entire point of it. Like, oh, it rewards people who run well early. Well, if they're gonna do that, why are we have like? And there's a caution. Like, run the race organically. The point of this is so the race is ran organically. That's the whole premise of it. But obviously, it creates now artificial strategy, and there's artificial these restarts being a whole lot now because we have a caution with 4 to go, but then they do a quickie yellow to get the race going with 2 to go on the stage. So we have this 1 lap shootout with guys who take no tires or 2 tires at the speedways, and then it's a freaking mess. And then here at the road courses, you're right. It was basically a compromise. Pick one. You either win stage like William Byron, and you're forced to go to the back, or you play the game of pitting early and knowing that tires are a lot more or a lot less important than track position, especially when you go from running up in the front like Byron did, and basically I think the restart afterward he never recovered. He ended up being like 20th and got up to like 13th or 14th, and then finished 5th in the second stage because he didn't pit again, and he was done. I mean, they tried to short pit on that last run and they got up to like 11th or 12th, but he was relegated back to 19th because his tires were absolutely killed because he was playing catch up, and it shouldn't be that way. I wish these races were ran organically, because if it was like a matter of, oh, a caution came out and you just played it right, you short pitted and you did the right thing, like, cool. But they have a reason to not. They have a reason to stay out and basically screw the rest of their race.
I listen, I like strategy. I like different forms of strategy. I just don't like being forced into having to watch the strategy happen based on the rules of the race. Back in the, before the stages, you used to have these guys try to figure out if it was going to be like a 2-stop race or a 3-stop race. And then you would see that, like, that's the type of strategy I like.
That's what it used to be.
Because then you have some guys that are trying to run the race backwards. Like, they'll pit at the earliest possible convenience, and then they'll just run it out as far as they can and split the rest of the race up and try to, do on like a 3-stop. And then you'll have other guys who will run as far as they can, then they'll run as far as they can again, and they'll try to do like a 2-stop. And you'll see how the two strategies will merge together, and you'll get like the best on one strategy against the best on the other strategy. And then coming down to the line, who's going to get it? The guy on the newer tires, or the guy who ended up, one less pit stop. That's the type of strategy that I've always liked to see at these road course races. And honestly, I it's not just the road course races. It's at the bigger speedways too. I mean, it could be at any NASCAR track, but I mean, definitely the bigger speedways like Pocono, Indianapolis, Daytona, Talladega. You've got these drivers, these teams. They're picking whether they want to go and get points now, or they want to have a chance at the win later. And yeah, it's lesser at like Daytona or Talladega because it doesn't really matter where you are. You can move through the field a lot easier.
At least now, not in the back in the day. It was hard to pass back even a year ago.
Right, but like at Pocono this year, Kyle Busch won that race, and Kyle Busch scored 40 points out of a possible 60. He gave up every single stage point that he could have gotten to win that race. That just, I don't like that. It doesn't promote that Kyle Busch was the best driver of the day. If I go and I look at that race, that particular race, the
Doesn't Larson win both
yeah,
stages?
Larson won both stages. Yeah, his finish doesn't really um resemble his result because Larson ended up getting
Yeah,
wrecked. But
yeah.
I mean, Larson ends up with 31 points in a 26th place finish. Brad Keselowski was really the best driver of the race if you look by points, because Keselowski got some stage points and he finished second. Keselowski gets 50 points on the day. Busch only gets 40 points. Yeah, Busch has got the win and he's got the playoff points and he's got the trophy and whatnot. But I mean, uh, the points should still be important, and like these points become a second nature, like a second, a second thought when it comes to stage racing at these bigger tracks like the road courses and like Pocono and some of the super speedways. So I don't like that. I don't think that's what the intention was at all. And you're like it's almost like you're giving free points away to guys who know that they're not gonna win the race, and it's points they don't deserve.
To to add to that point, Ty Dillon has 2 stage wins. Has he been a threat to win any race this year? It's a rhetorical question. Um, I know exactly what the stages are, and I think you do too. It's artificial. It's to create excitement in the middle of the race, particularly on these restarts when there's 1 or 2 laps to go. Crazy finishes, even though they're not finishes, they're just part of the race for some reason, whether it's lap 80 or 160 or 100, whatever stage lap it is, that's a really important lap. And we've adopted it in our league for FTF, and we do it a lot differently because we don't stop for cautions. And I think it's honestly that's what NASCAR should do if they want to implement something where uh, you have, if you want to reward people who ran up front and competed. But to go back to the whole strategy thing elsewhere, look at super speedways. They basically have 2 options. They run it backwards and pit, say like lap 15, and then they run the rest of the run out, or they pit as late as they can and short pit, and it basically makes the first 2 stages of a super speedway uh, just a single file fest because they're trying to be faster than the other pack who's doing the completely opposite strategy, and it completely takes away from the actual racing to the stage. It becomes like who can run the train the fastest, and then you go look at Charlotte with the 600 miler. You basically had a situation where you were going to have one green flag pit stop every stage, and you knew exactly when they were going to pit between lap 48 and 52. They're going to split the run. There's no other strategy because the race isn't progressing organically and naturally. There's a break every 100 laps, and in reality there's a break every 93 laps because they run way too many caution laps after these stages. They should be 1 to 2 laps minimum. Slow them down, make them pit, 1 to go at the line, go. Like they're such long breaks, and it's because they want to get commercials in, and they have this huge TV contract that they have to fulfill, and this compromise that they've created. Oh, you want to see racing? Great, we'll show the racing, but guess what? We have to find a way to get cautions. We have to throw commercials into the mix, so we create stage racing. It's supposed to create excitement in the middle of the race, but I don't know about you, but a stage finish, barring maybe a couple here and there that I remember, are not that big of a deal to me. It's just I don't really think about it other than that like 5 seconds. Oh, that was a cool race to the finish to lap 100 that we somehow have to care about now because they give 10 points, which at the end of the day, unless you're in the back half of the top 20, it doesn't really matter. It does not matter at all. It's just ridiculous.
The stage breaks really aren't getting rid of that many commercials anyway throughout the event. I still remember plenty of events where we've had long stage breaks where they've had like 7-8 lap cautions, that for example, if we're at like a short track and the stage is like a 50-lap stage, they've gone 10 laps under caution, and instead of it being a 50-lap stage, it's a 40-lap stage so that they could get some commercials out of the way. But then they'll go like 10 laps in and then, oh, we're back under commercial again. So it's just it doesn't I don't see how they're, it's not really adding up to me as far as that's concerned. I'm not gonna sit here and knock the stages though, because I do like the stages. I just don't like them in their current format. I like the idea of stages. I like the idea of giving points throughout the race. I just don't like the way that it's being done right now, and I don't like the way that they're counting laps in the middle of. I mean, if they're gonna take a break, fine, take a break, but don't count the laps. That's really been my biggest issue with that, is that they count the laps. But I like I said before, definitely at super speedways, at road courses, they should just race through, and I think we can both agree on that point. Um, we're coming up on an hour here. Um, I'm pretty much I'm pretty happy with how this episode turned out.
I agree.
Just some quick points. As we mentioned before, there was some other racing going on. Formula One, Lewis Hamilton dominated in France.
Big surprise.
Not even surprised in the slightest. I heard it was like the most boring race of the weekend.
So it was an F1 race.
Yeah, pretty much. It was an F1 race. IndyCar, it was a lot more compelling with the IndyCar race, but again, it was domination. This time by Alexander Rossi at Road America. He was able to defeat Will Power at the 4 mile track. So good on Rossi at Road America. And we got peak antifreeze iRacing series coming up. I guess at this point it would be tonight in about 20 hours.
Yeah.
So by the time this podcast comes out, it'll be like, it'll already have happened probably. So they're going to be racing at Chicagoland, and NASCAR heat is off this week. So that's what we got in the other realms of motorsports and e-motorsports and whatnot. This weekend itself in NASCAR, Chicagoland, should be a good weekend. I think they got a triple header going on. Actually, I'm not sure if Xfinity is on or not, but actually, I'll check that right now. I know the Cup is racing at Chicagoland. I know the trucks are racing at Chicagoland.
Right now too. Let's see.
Xfinity, they
Yeah,
are.
they're running.
Yeah, so it'll be a triple header weekend with all three in the National Series in Chicagoland. Should be a good one. Last year, I remember they were talking about like the heat inside the cars, and I know it's definitely getting hotter out as we, begin to wind into the beginning days and weeks of summer. So we'll see if that's another talking point this year. The Xfinity cars, of course, being the hottest of the three, so we'll see what happens with that. Do you got anything planned for the rest of the week, Kevin?
No. I mean, I'll cheer my good friend Blake on tomorrow. I just want to do a quick note about you said the heat. Denny Hamlin talked about that a little bit with apparently with this whole mandating the right side window at these short tracks and road courses. They're really scorching hot. That and I don't know what's going on this year, but the carbon monoxide issues across the board, Cup, Xfinity, and trucks have had their fair share of issues. It's been a really weird year. You wouldn't think in 2019 you'd have these kind of health risks where someone's having like life-threatening like carbon monoxide poisoning. The last time I heard about that being a serious issue that I can think of, like where it like really affected someone's career, was Rick Mast back in the mid 90s. So it's just crazy that it's creeping back in 2019. I don't know if it's teams trying to find speed at the risk of safety. I really hope not. I think they're better than that. But as far as like looking forward to this week, I love Chicagoland. I think it's one of the last tracks that actually has tire wear, and it's an old surface. It's 18 years old at this point. It's one of the oldest surfaces we have. I hope they don't touch this track. I hope they don't screw it up like they did with Texas. I don't foresee them doing that. If they do repave it, I think they'll go the same route as Homestead and do some progressive banking just because the way the asphalt is, you can't make it how they used to. But I think it'll be a fun weekend. Chicagoland is like I said, is a really good track, and we should have some good racing this week.
I'm looking forward to it. Um, should definitely be some good racing, and we'll see if Martin Truex can go out and win his first career back-to-back race, and not inch any closer to Dale Jr.'s record of 26 races with no wins in a row. So that's all I got. We're right on the hour mark, so we'll wrap it up here. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. If you're watching this on YouTube, remember you can also take us on the go. If you've got an Apple phone, Apple Podcasts, we're on there. If you got a smartphone on like the Android platform, you can get Google Play Music, and we're on there, or Spotify for any type of platform. My name is Justin Melillo. Kevin McAdams, thank you again for joining me. Everybody else, have a safe and wonderful weekend, day, whatever.
Goodbye.